Welcome back to the Larson Show. Pleasure to be with you, and always glad to welcome back to the program the self-described most scrutinized politician in the United States of America, Wisconsin's Governor Scott Walker. How are you doing, Governor?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, I'm glad to have you on. And of course, I've read your book, Unintimidated, and Mark Thiessen, who was your who worked with you on the book, is one of our favorite guests on the program. We're
Mark
anxious.
is spectacular, yeah.
He is. We're anxious to see you run for president.
Well, we're spending a lot of time traveling the country. I'm in Washington D.C. today, but I've been in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina of late. But we're in the midst of a budget debate in our state, and it'll be done at the end of June. And what I've said is that's my most important responsibility every 2 years. But by the end of that time frame, shortly after our budget is done, we'll announce to the country what our intentions are. But we've certainly been getting a lot of encouragement, and we appreciate it.
Well, I get a lot of questions from people saying, who's your favorites? And I say, I'm not going to pick somebody to endorse yet. Maybe I won't endorse anybody at all. But I always say that, watching governors run for president is the best because you've actually had some experience at actually running a large government where the job goes 24 hours a day.
Well, that's exactly right. You do a lot of the same things that the president does, just on a different scale. You put together a cabinet. You work with the legislative branch. You have to bring your state together, and you have to ultimately, the buck stops with you. It's not enough to just give speeches or take votes. Not that there aren't a lot of great senators out there, but it's a whole different dynamic. And what I've found going across the country is not only are they looking for executive leadership, historically, I think before this president, the last time we'd elected a member of Congress was 1960, so it's been a while. But I also hear people want someone new and fresh. We're going to take on a name from the past. They don't want a name from the past. They want a name from the future. They want someone from outside of Washington, for sure. They feel just a total disconnect from Washington and want somebody who's going to come in and shake it up. But probably the most important thing for us, they say they want someone who can do more than just talk about it, who can deliver it. I think that's what's made me the most interested is I think we have consistently fought and won the big conservative battles to protect hardworking taxpayers, and I think not only does our base want that, I think increasingly Americans want that.
Of course, given your history in Wisconsin, the unions are going to be sharpening up their knives right now if they aren't already.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. But you know what? We were told the last couple of times in the nomination process that in order to win, we needed to get somebody that would be a little bit more appealing to the middle. But that somehow we've heard that plenty of times, not just in presidential elections, but others out there. And those groups still come out and beat the crap out of our nominee. They go after him, whether president or senator or governor out there. What we found in Wisconsin, a state where we didn't go on Republican for president since 1984, we've won 3 times over a 4-year period, not by moving to the center, but by leading. That's what independent voters want. They want someone to lead just like our base does. And I think that's the key to success going forward. Yeah, the unions will be out, but so will a lot of other Americans who finally want someone to stand up and lead.
I'm talking to Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin. We should assume you're running for president.
Well, like I said, I won't make our intentions known until after the end of the budget. But obviously, a lot of encouragement, a lot of positive feedback. People, as I mentioned, say they want someone who's a fighter. We didn't just there are a lot of good candidates or would-be candidates who are fighters but haven't won anything. There's a lot of other good or would-be candidates who have won elections but haven't taken on big fights. As far as I can see across the spectrum of likely or current candidates, there's nobody else in the field who has done both fight and win, not just the ballot box, but consistently win on common sense conservative ideas. And I just think that's what people are hungry for.
Hey, Governor Walker, let me ask you about this. People are going to remember the history that you have with the unions in Wisconsin. And as I said, the unions are probably going to be out for you. But that's the unions, the organization. But the individual union members, will you remind people what a lot of those union members decided to do in Wisconsin after you freed them from the obligation to pay their dues to unions?
Yeah, giving them the freedom to choose First Public and now everybody, they opted out of their unions. That's what, they had the freedom to work, whether they wanted to be in a labor union or not. Many of them said, hey, why would I pay this money? If I was a teacher in Milwaukee, why would I pay $1,500 when I can use that money for my kids' college education or save up for something else out there? Why would I do that when now I can talk right to my principal? I don't need a union steward. And they left. And that's what the folks, the special interest, big government union bosses in Washington so objected to. It's why they sent 100,000 people in to protest against this, because they didn't want that power taken away. And that, to me, is just about freedom.
Well, see, the reason I ask that is, we assume that an awful lot of union members are going to vote Democrat right away. They're yellow dog, they'd vote for a yellow dog if it was a Democrat. But do you suppose that, given your history, that you could appeal to people around the country who are forced to be in those non-right-to-work states, half of them,
totally.
25 states?
In the recall election, one of the exit polls, I think it was NBC if I remember right, showed in the exit polls for self-identified union households, almost 40% of them voted for me. That says to me that given the chance, they're taxpayers as well. They don't want to be bound by the big government union bosses. They want a government that's more effective and more efficient, certainly more accountable. They want all these things just like anybody else out there. And so we found that just being straight up with people, telling them what you're doing and why you're doing it, ultimately in the end, at first it's hard, because 4 years ago, the beginning of 2011, when I did the things we were doing to reform our state and our local governments, my approval rating was so low in the 30s that Time magazine actually called me Dead Man Walker. By the next June, we had won the recall election with more votes and a higher percentage of the votes than we did the first time.
That's why you're still around, and Time magazine is for all intents and purposes kind of done.
Well, there you have it.
Well, let me ask you about this. Let's assume you became president of the United States, you're walking in on what I think President Obama, by the end of his term, will have created $20 trillion in debt, which at low interest rates is punishing, but at high interest rates, if the interest rates tick up, is a ticking time bomb. What do you do about that?
It really is. There's a number of things we need to do, not just in response to that, but overall. Growth and reform have to be the hallmarks of taking on that challenge going forward. You got to do a series of things to reform the tax code, to reduce the burden, to make it attractive, to bring American jobs back from overseas, to put more Americans back to work, repeal Obamacare, rein in the regulatory climate, having all the above energy policy. All those things will lead, I believe, to dramatic growth in the private sector. And in doing so, you can go from the stagnant growth we're at now up to anywhere from 4 to 4.5% growth. That would be a big help, not just for the economy. That would help drive in, I think, more revenues through a broader base and lower rates. That would help. But that alone, obviously, is not enough. Then I think you got to, through reform, take major portions of the federal government and send it back to the states and ultimately to the people. The House Republicans now for a couple of years under Paul Ryan have talked about moving Medicaid through a block grant back to the states. But I would go from education, the transportation infrastructure, the workforce investment dollars, to even education dollars. I mean, think about where would you rather have your dollars spent on education, at the federal government, or would you rather spend it back at your local school board and local school out there? All those things would help rein in costs because they're much more effective and efficient and accountable at the local and state level. And then you can take on the big challenges, Social Security and Medicare. There are ways to reasonably do that don't affect people older than me who are at or near retirement, but for my age or younger, can make reasonable reforms that put us on the path to financial sustainability and protect not just our children, but our children's children going forward. The only other area that would be slightly different than that is I do think the one exception to that is we do have to make, I think, a bigger investment in our defense budget, at a minimum going to the levels of Secretary Gates, just because right now I think we're dangerously close to not being able to secure and defend our borders and secure and defend or protect our interests around the world. And we need to be able to do that just as we did under President Reagan.
Glad to have Governor Scott Walker with me. It turns out last week I was broadcasting from Israel. Get up in the morning, and in Wednesday's paper, I read that Governor Walker had been in the state of Israel same time we were, meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What'd you get out of the trip, Governor?
Well, it was great on many fronts. You're right. We were on Tuesday. I met with Netanyahu. In fact, Ari Fleischer saw me afterwards and said, former spokesman for President Bush, and said, "Wow, did you guys know each other before that?" Because we hit it off well. He obviously knew about my comments speaking out about the Iran deal, and that if I were president, I'd pull back on that in day one. he knew about the things I had said about needing to reestablish Israel as an ally. So that was good. I met with actually a number of leaders in the Knesset and others while I was there. But Monday was probably, for me at least, the most significant. I spent the entire day traveling Israel in a helicopter. Went from Jerusalem to the Jordan Valley, up to the Golan Heights. Got out on the hill, looked at Syria, then went over and looked at Lebanon. Went down to the Sea of Galilee, which for me personally was just great to see the place where Christ lived as an adult, and to see where the Sermon on the Mount and the feeding of the 5,000 was. But then that went to Nazareth, over to Tel Aviv, and then down to Gaza. And I got to tell you, Gaza for me was really amazing because to be with the soldiers there, to see other local folks there, and to understand that just the pressure they're under, that within seconds they have to be ready to seek cover, and you realize the kind of threat they were in. And then I came back, and as we were heading to Jerusalem, they went up in the air higher and hovered for a while. And I could see the basin of the Dead Sea. I could see the Mediterranean. It's actually kind of cool. They pointed down and said that's about the spot they believe where David slayed Goliath, which is just cool to think about things like that. But you could see all around the threats that they face and how close those borders were.